I'll now pass the floor to Professor Drs Menache from the Stop Vivisection Committee.
Good morning, and I'd like to thank the organisers of this conference, particularly Eurodeputy Eleonora Evi and Mr. Fabio Massimo Castaldo. Grazie, grazie, grazie. The title of my talk is Why a Counter-Conference? Well, according to the physicist Isaac Newton, for those of you who studied physics, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. So this is our reaction to the European Commission's conference. The Stop Vivisection initiative, as you've been told, was one of only 3 that were successful in achieving 1 million signatures. And it was heard at the European Parliament on the 11th of May 2015. One of the core proposals, one of the main proposals made to the European Commission by the organisers of Stop Vivisection was to organise a scientific debate. We asked them to organise a scientific debate, because today there is no scientific debate. The debate on the issue of animal experimentation today is purely an ethical debate. There is no scientific debate. We've been having this debate for the past 100 years. The ethical debate has lasted 100 years, and it will go on for another 100 years if we do not discuss the science. And just to remind ourselves, the conference organized by the European Commission, so that we are very clear in our minds the difference between this conference and their conference, is that the European Commission avoids the key issues that we asked for. And I will quote the European Commission. The conference was announced, their conference was announced in the European Commission communication responding to the European Citizens Initiative Stop Vivisection, and is one of 4 actions that should contribute towards the goal of ultimately phasing out animal testing. The 3 other actions are: 1, accelerating progress in the 3 R's through knowledge sharing; 2, development, validation and implementation of new alternative approaches; 3, enforcement of compliance with the 3 R's principle and alignment of relevant sector legislation. The conference will include a session to report progress on these 3 actions. Well, the difference between this Congress and the other one, they are talking about the past. We are beyond the 3 R's. Okay, this conference is about the future, the present and the future. The other conference is about the past. They are stuck in the past. So I want to make it absolutely clear on behalf of the 1 million people who signed our ECI that the organisers of Stop Vivisection make it absolutely clear that the European Commission conference taking place today somewhere else does not bear our signature and is not in our name. The fact that the European Commission continues to avoid any real debate that would question the validity of the animal model as predictive of human response to drugs and disease is unacceptable in light of current scientific knowledge, and is a humiliation of the 1 million EU citizens who signed the ECI. It's a humiliation. A far more constructive and democratic response by the European Commission would have been to ask the European Parliament to launch a commission of inquiry into the question of the validity of the animal model as predictive of human response to drugs and disease. That would have been a far more constructive response on behalf of the European Commission. Sadly, they didn't do it. The European Commission is also essentially immune to any legal challenge and is not required to propose any new legislation despite the clear message for change of over 1 million EU citizens. One option is, if the European Commission is not willing to ask the Parliament to launch a commission of inquiry, then we can do it at national level. And indeed, this is what is happening at the moment. Individual EU member states are going to be asked to launch their own national commission of inquiry into the validity of the animal model as predictive of human outcome to drugs and disease. So just to remind ourselves, the manifesto of the Stop Vivisection ECI was that considering clear ethical objections to animal experiments and solid scientific principles that invalidate the animal model for predicting human response, we urge the European Commission to abrogate Directive 2010/63 on the protection of animals used for scientific purposes and to present a new proposal that does away with animal experimentation and instead makes compulsory the use in biomedical and toxicological research of data directly relevant for the human species. Just to remind ourselves, the hearing in the European Parliament on the 11th of May 2015 lasted 3.5 hours. The representatives of Stop Vivisection were allowed a total of 34 minutes in which to present their case. A total of 34 minutes in the 3.5-hour discussion. And the expert witness who was flown across from California, Dr. Ray Greek, was given about 16 minutes in which to present his scientific argument. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is a reflection of how seriously the European Commission takes this ECI and also how seriously they consider the scientific argument. Now, this is hugely important because all of EU policies, whether it's the REACH regulation, whether it's on pesticides, whether it's the medicinal drugs, all of that is based largely on data obtained from animal tests. And that has a huge impact on our health, our environment, in addition to animal suffering. So this is something that must be taken very, very seriously. And in conclusion, I hope the day is near when animal experimentation will be seen for what it is, and that is as the biggest health scandal of modern times and the biggest scientific fraud of modern times. Thank you.
I'm now going to pass the floor to Dr. Ray Greek, who is the president of Americans for Medical Advancement Organization, and they are particularly focusing on the use of animals in research and testing and the use for this in medication. Now, I'm very interested in medication, the pharmaceuticals industry, so hopefully he will now be speaking to us on Skype. I hope he's heard me.
My name is Dr. Ray Greek, and the title of my lecture is What Role Should Science Play When Discussing the Use of Animals in Research and Testing? Before I begin, I want to express my appreciation to MEP Miss Evie for holding this conference and inviting me to speak. My lecture can be divided into 3 topics. The first, why is science important? The second, how to evaluate scientific arguments. And the third, rules for a debate. So why is science important? The use of animals in biomedical research and testing is based on the idea that results from drug and disease research obtained in one species have predictive value for another species, namely humans. I, along with others, have proven that what happens in an animal has no predictive value for what happens in humans. This knowledge should have major consequences for several reasons. First, society has indicated that it will not allow animals to be used in such experiments unless they have predictive value for humans. Second, using animals for their alleged predictive value is in reality a waste of time and money, as it contradicts current science. Third, it does not make sense to call for alternatives to animal modeling, as animal models are not effective in the first place. Just as there are no alternatives to gaining nutrients from eating rocks, so there are no alternatives to using animals to study drug and disease response in humans. To use the word alternative within this context, for example, the title of this panel being Panel 2, Alternative Methods, is a category mistake. Animal models have never had predictive value for the response of human patients to drugs and disease, and therefore it is dangerously misleading to treat them as belonging in the same category as valid human-based research. The main reason animals are used in drug development and research is for their predictive value. And animals have been acknowledged to have no predictive value by the pharmaceutical industry as well as other scientists. By definition, one cannot have an alternative to something that either does not exist or is ineffective. Now, we do need alternatives to some uses of animals, such as when a heart valve from a pig is used as a replacement for a human valve. But society does not need alternatives for the research and testing purported to be of predictive value for humans. And yet, this is the very reason a vast majority of animal use is currently justified. And yet it is simply ineffective. Fourth, the results from using animals are now known to harm and kill humans. Thus, there is no reason to continue to try and justify their use with myths about protecting humans in clinical trials or learning about human disease. We now know such is not the case. And fifth, funding that currently pays for animal modeling needs to be redirected to human-based methods. To date, none of the above consequences have been acknowledged except by select scientists, mainly from the drug development industry. So society as a whole needs to have the predictive value of animal models publicly evaluated by unbiased expert scientists. Before having a political or philosophical discussion about any science-related topic, we should make sure that the science undergirding the various positions is sound. Number 2, how to evaluate a scientific argument. Science is a process which includes experts in specific areas evaluating the work of other scientists and determining whether the research and conclusions from that research are reliable. The best example of this is the peer review process of science journals. In this process, a number of experts are asked to review a submission to the journal and determine the following: whether the submission is in accordance with known facts about our current scientific understanding of the material universe, whether the terms and assumptions are consistent with proper usage, whether the methodology is appropriate, whether the statistics were properly performed, and whether there are any other flaws in the reasoning process of the authors. Now, this process is not foolproof, but under appropriate circumstances, it is usually capable of separating fact from fiction. Depending on the contents of this submission to the journal, experts from several different areas of science might be asked to review the submission and judge the part of the submission that falls under his or her area of expertise. This process should be employed in order to determine the scientific viability of using one species to predict drug and disease response for another. We want to utilize the process used in peer-reviewed science journals in a debate format to resolve the scientific issues surrounding the use of animal models. We have published enough articles in the scientific literature that reasonable scientists with enough education in the various aspects of trans-species modeling theory should now realize that animal models will never have predictive value for human response to drugs and disease. But very few scientists are reading these articles. There are currently so many science publications that even scientists interested in the animal model issue cannot possibly read and understand all of the relevant articles. It could take decades for scientists to actually read our articles, and even longer for them to act on this information, since there are so many vested interest groups supporting the status quo. Even prominent anti-vivisection campaigners fail to appreciate the current science our position is based on. Patient lives depend on society acting on this knowledge, and a debate, as I will momentarily outline, is the way to accomplish this. A debate, sponsored by a government, with implications for legislation and future funding, would force the animal model community to respond to our position and present their justification for animal modeling. Engaging at debates at universities, as we have frequently done, accomplishes nothing, as the audience does not understand the science, and reasonable scientists are always left in doubt as to the value of animal modeling. They frequently express the opinion that there just must be more to the argument than the animal modeling position has presented, because the meager arguments offered by the animal modelers in the debate were so easily defeated by me. A public debate judged by experts would settle this issue. In order for our position to be judged fairly by expert scientists, we need the following rules for the debate. Now, the following is only a partial list, so please see the website for more details. The subject of the debate will be resolved. The fact that animal models have no predictive value for human response to perturbations that occur at higher levels of organization, for example, human response to drugs and disease, means that the vast majority of animal use in science in general and research and testing in particular should cease. Obviously, I will be taking the pro in the debate. We will also need a single person or perhaps a group of 3 in order to moderate and organize the debate. The debate will consist of submitted position papers and a short public portion where the sides will briefly explain their position and the experts will render their judgment. A panel of scientists who are experts in the relative fields will act as judges. These scientists may come from academia or industry, and they will do the most important task in the debate, which is to judge the position papers. These experts should include scientists from the following fields: clinical medicine in general, as well as clinicians from the fields of infectious diseases, cancer, heart disease, and neurology. At least one should also come from the math or physics department of a university and have expertise in complexity theory. At least one should come from the philosophy of science division and have expertise in critical thinking, the history of science behind medical discoveries, and by this I do not mean the zeitgeist of society at the time the discovery was being made, I mean the actual history of how the discovery was made, and finally the philosophy of science in general. At least one person should be an expert in statistics, evolutionary biology, including evo-devo, clinical research, drug development, personalized medicine, and basic research. These scientists should be recognized as experts by society as well as the scientific community. Further, they should have no vested interests in the outcome of the debate. A vested interest would include situations such as the following. Number 1, a direct financial interest in the outcome of the debate, such as currently receiving money for animal-based research. Number 2, an indirect financial interest in the form of currently or formerly working for a university or company that received funding for animal-based research or testing. Number 3, an indirect vested interest, such as having at least in part established one's reputation because of research using animals. Number 4, an indirect vested interest in the form of having a close friend or relative who currently works for a university or company that receives funding for animal-based research or testing. 5, a philosophical or emotional interest in the use of animals in research and testing, such as a well-known figure from the animal protection movement or from the vivisection / pro-animal use movement. Other situations may be addressed on an individual basis. Science has changed since animal modeling began using animals in earnest in the 19th century, but never before have experts examined the evidence for and against animal modeling. Such a debate, judged by an unbiased group of experts, is long overdue. No one argues about funding scientists to invent a machine that produces more energy than it uses, because science has proven that such a device cannot exist. Likewise, no one argues that cell theory, germ theory, or the kinetic theory of gases is wrong. In the final analysis, animal modeling is about science, and that science has changed greatly from the 19th century. Keeping our laws and lawmakers up to date through communicating life-saving current knowledge is a moral imperative. Once so informed, the lawmakers will have a moral imperative to abandon animal modeling in favor of saving the lives of human patients. Thank you again for allowing me to present this lecture.
Thank you very much.